Hi, this is Dr. John Douillard, and welcome to LifeSpa.com, where we prove the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with modern science. And today, I'm going to interview one of my favorite authors, author of the best-selling book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman. He's the author of 17 books. He's a black belt in Aikido, former world champion trampoline athlete, coach at Stanford, professor at UC Berkeley and Oberlin College. He's a member of the UC Berkeley Athletic Hall of Fame and the U.S. Gymnastics Hall of Fame. I am thrilled to interview him about the concepts of my first book was called Body, Mind, and Sport. And it's all about, this idea that we can achieve full human potential in life through sport. And I really feel like that's a big part of Dan Millman's message that he's been writing for 40 years of writing. And he's a brilliant author, brilliant man. I'm so glad to have him here. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure having a chance to chat with you, John.
Dan, I love the idea of your books, teaching through story, telling stories about how people can really begin to access their full human potential. And I know that's a big part of what you do. And I want to keep curious, like you've written so many books, you have so much to say, and I want to dive into a lot of that. But I wonder if you could kind of hone it down and say, this is the one thing that I've learned all these years training athletes, and for your own performance, that is the biggest takeaway for you, not only, on the tramp, but in your life.
Those big takeaways are always a challenge. A man named Stanislaw Lech once said, I wanted to tell the world just one word. Unable to do that, I became a writer. And I've had to write 17 books to express what I wanted to say. But I will tell a brief story, since you mentioned stories. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, when he was in hospice care near death, his good friend Houston Smith, who literally wrote the book on world religions, Houston asked Aldous, he said, Aldous, you've traveled the world studying every spiritual tradition from all major cultures, even minor ones. He said, is there any way to summarize all that you've learned? And Professor Huxley said, I'm a little embarrassed to say I can probably summarize it all in about 6 words. Try to be a little kinder. Now, that's a wonderful message. And that was a true story about what Aldous said after everything he'd learned. But I think dealing with the story of athletes and the athletic journey, the journey of training and physical endeavor, it's such a great master metaphor of our lives. I've found that most athletes have learned universal or spiritual laws through their training, but they rarely are conscious of those laws because they're so busy focused on points and games and matches and wins and losses that they don't realize the gift inside the wrapping of whatever their particular sport is. And so in my own journey, yes, who would have guessed that it would have changed my entire life and set my destiny in motion, really, because I love to jump up and down on a trampoline. Who would have guessed that? But it led to a college scholarship and the championships and a coaching job at Stanford University in gymnastics and on, and my writing career from that single thing. So coming around to your question, more and more, I tend to speak to people about the wisdom of not comparing ourselves to other people, and because it's a profound disrespect for our own process. When I've taught back somersaults, for example, to different athletes, some people learn them quicker than others, and yet those who take longer to learn them often learn them better than those who learn them faster. So my message then, my takeaway, is about respecting our own process and trusting ourselves and our life unfolding rather than always comparing it to someone else to see how well we're doing.
Well, that that sort of, really deflates the whole wisdom of competition, right? I mean, our whole world's all about, winning at any cost. And I in my book, Body, Mind, Sport, years ago, talked about what competition really is, which is, how well you can connect with yourself is the real competition. It's not about beating the other person. And I know you talked a little bit about the benefits of relaxation, and how that, we talk about how my best race is my easiest race, and how athletes stumble upon this runner's high, rarely take it into the rest of their life, but they've tasted it, they've experienced it, as you pointed out. And I wonder if you could share with us some of the insights that you have with regard to competition, because our whole world seems to be built upon this comparing ourselves with others and then taking them out or being better than them.
Well, I would love to speak about that. Thank you for introducing that subject. In fact, one of the major problems with the world today and our survival as a species may actually depend on this, is making the shift from competitive mind to collaborative mind, based on a recognition of our essential unity. It has to come from there. When we begin to see the same consciousness in others, as in ourselves, the same light shining through these billions of different eyes and experiences, when that becomes a reality, we are then able to make that shift rather than always asking, well, what's for my self-interest? What's for my highest good? We can ask, what is for the highest good of all concerned here? Because in a sense, we identify, we realize we're all in this together. So to use a more homely example, coming down from the abstract idea, more specifically, people cite Darwin as the proof, the fitness, the survival of the fittest, that it's all about tooth and nail and all that. But people ignore Darwin's significant writings that he did on how species that collaborate have a better chance of survival than those who merely compete. But most people don't know about that aspect of his teaching. And when I play the game of tennis, to use a sports analogy, there is no opponent across the net for me. To me, what I view across that net is my teacher and my student. And they may not be intending in that moment to be my teacher, but without them, how can I improve? They're showing me my weak areas. They're challenging me to do my best. So when I play the game of tennis, it's a competitive game. I have nothing against competitive games. They're part of our sports culture. However, I don't have competitive mind, because I do view them as my teacher and my student. So I bring less tension to the game, less hostility, more just flow into the game, because I'm their teacher as well. So we're taking turns being each other's teacher and student. It's a whole different environment. It's more pleasurable to play with that attitude. So even though it's a competitive sport, I'm not saying let's be radical and banish all competitive sports. I'm saying let's play them with collaborative mind, and where another athlete falls down, like in football, and you help them up, because we're all in this together. We're playing a game. People forget that life is a game we play as if it matters, and certainly sports can teach us that with the right approach.
Yeah, wow, this is amazing. It's so beautiful. It reminds me of a study that I've written about recently, that they took some magpies, couple of magpies, and they tried to open up some locked food and they couldn't figure it out. They put another couple of maybe 20 or so magpies in there and they figured it out in short order. Then they went back into the research and they were like, how did we triple our brain size? Was it the cooking? Was it the meat? Was it the fishing? Was it the eating of grain, different things, or the theories. And what they have actually discovered, which is actually a brand new theory, was it wasn't any of those things. It was us coming together as community. As our tribes became bigger, we came growing into more civilizations. We came together. And when we came together, that's what tripled our brain size. It wasn't competing or comparing or being better than. It was actually when we actually came together in community, which in a way is exactly what you're talking about, is that when you're on the court and you're fighting against somebody, you're actually, you're just trying to beat them, and you create separation. And we are driven by the reward, the chemistry of reward, the dopamine response. If I beat that person, I get the win, I get the gold medal, I get the reward. And we don't realize that that reward is fleeting, and you can deplete those dopamine receptors, and like athletes, when they retire, oftentimes they become depressed. Particularly the extreme athletes who lived on dopamine, they really become depressed. So I'm curious about that. If you could talk about, how does that reward chemistry, which we're all addicted to, which is sort of our culture, how does that get in the way of our true inner potential and perhaps the enjoyment of the game and the enjoyment of our life?
Well, you open up another wonderful string here. Today it's called crowdsourcing, but it's based on the wisdom that no one is smarter than all of us. A jury is smarter than the individuals in that jury, which I experienced once being on a jury. And in the sense, one thing I love about movies, good movies, there are a lot of bad ones too, of course, but is film is the ultimate collaborative art. No one person can really make a great film. You need someone to score the film, the music and the directing and the set design. You need everybody's seen the credits of a movie, sees how many people are involved, experts in their own field to make a movie or build a building. One person cannot build a building. So we can create wonderful edifices and wonderful creative art, as you say, working with other people. So this whole idea of the dopamine and the competition and the endorphin high, we can get those things but it's not because of the competition. It's because of the perceived stakes that matter to people. So they go into that flow, that zone. It becomes important in the moment, but it's no different than a violinist who is about to perform for an audience. They're not competing with anyone. Hopefully not. If it's an orchestra, they're not competing with the other violinists. They're simply going for their best performance, which is why I recommend to athletes or anyone in business or any other field of life is don't strive for success. Because that's defined by, if it's defined by beating other people, that doesn't sound like much fun. But go for excellence. That's something we can all control moment to moment. We can pay attention. We can be mindful, to use that, that popular term. We can pay attention. We can relax as much as we can. All athletes know everything works better. We can talk about that. I'd love to get into that whole power of relaxation. But that's why I say don't strive for success. That is not in our control. And what I mean by that is we can control our efforts in life, but we cannot control the outcomes. We can't control whether we sink a putt every time in golf or make a basket doing free throws. But by making a good effort over time, we increase the odds of getting our desired outcomes over not making the effort. But I don't mean the effort in terms of effortful. I don't mean tension or some kind of desperation or hypermotivation. If we simply strive for excellence in what we do, that can make all the difference because that is within our control.
So in your book, Body, Mind, Mastery, and by the way, you can actually get more of information about Dan's work and understand and all of his books, his best-selling books, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is a phenomenal book, at Dan Millman, MILLMAN.com. So please check that out. But in your book, Body, Mind, Mastery, you talk about not setting goals. And I imagine that is obviously to engage in a more process versus goal-oriented experience of life. So can you dive into that a little bit further and about why we should not set goals?
Sure. And actually, I would say something that paradoxically might be just the opposite as well. I don't think long-term goals are very realistic. Like, I want to be in the Olympics. I want to win the Ironman. Yeah. Those are long-term goals, and one person's going to do that. Maybe their stars align. Maybe they have a great day. That's not as realistic a goal as my goal today is to do 30 push-ups, this many sit-ups, like going to the gym, doing this many reps. That's a short-term goal. But let me just share a story about, you probably know, maybe you've seen the Peaceful Warrior movie based on my first book. Yeah. They made a movie with Nick Nolte playing the old gas station sage I called Socrates. And in that film, there's a scene in which Dan and Socrates hike to the top of this big hill. And Dan has this revelation. The character says, Soc, I just realized that it's the journey that makes us happy, not the destination. And there's a certain wisdom in that revelation because most of our life is spent on the journey, not just reaching the destination. And yet, without a destination in mind, there is no journey. We just wander around. So I do believe that we human beings are hardwired goal seekers. When I watch my grandchild, when my little granddaughter or grandson were very young, infants crawling across the floor, they were heading for something. There's something they wanted, some sparkly thing they wanted to get to. So they weren't just crawling around to crawl around. That would be nice to exercise, but they were heading for something. And so to me, people are happiest when they are, I would define success. Let me put it this way. Success to me is making progress toward a goal that's meaningful to us. I think we're most absorbed in life, most engaged with life, most fulfilled actually, when we're moving toward a meaningful goal. So on the contrary, I don't put down goals. In fact, I wrote one book called Living on Purpose, another, The Life You Were Born to Live, another, the four purposes of life. So I'm all for purpose and moving toward that and living a purposeful life moment to moment. I know my purpose in this moment, sharing with you, and you know your purpose, and your listeners know their purpose in this moment. So we can always know our purpose, our goal in the moment. And that's maybe the best one to focus on and do what we need to do in line with that purpose. So that's what I would say about goals. I'm all for them, just not too long-term or abstract goals.
There's an old Ayurvedic saying that to respect the boundaries within the boundless, and that we set these goals and we stay in the process of accomplishing those goals. We then find ourselves unlimited in our potential. So sort of a do less, accomplish more, do nothing, accomplish everything. Sort of the idea that trying to get into that place where it's effortless. And you talk about 3 strategies in your book, non-resistance, accommodation, and balance. And I wonder if you could kind of help us understand how we could use those principles in our life to experience, at the very least, the less is more approach, and maybe even get a glimpse of what it means to do nothing and accomplish everything, like that, best race is my easiest race experience.
Well, I was going to use an example when you mentioned relaxation. When I was playing golf, I learned to play golf just so I could play with my dad, who loved it. When he was around 85 years old, he golfed his age, which is pretty good, I think.
Wow, yeah.
So when I was a coach at Stanford, I had free access to the Stanford course. And so I would start to play some golf. And it's a very Zen game, as you know, and I was learning some things. And I'd heard many, many, many times, as most of us have who played, let the weight of the club head do the work. Don't strain, don't try to hit the ball or use too much strength. Just flow and let the club head swing. And I said, yes, that sort of thing. But there's a big difference between understanding and realization. And I understood the concept of not trying too hard, letting the club head swing by itself. But one day I was out on the fairway using a 3-wood, and I had a slow uphill along fairway. And I just said, what the hell? And I just didn't care. I just relaxed, let the club swing back, and then I went, whoop, just like no effort. I couldn't believe it. I heard that sweet sound when it hit the sweet spot of the club, and it just skimmed across the surface of the ground and slowly rose into the air. One of the best hits I ever made in golf. And it was like a transcendent experience. I was actually doing it. I finally grasped or realized all that good advice about letting the weight of the club head do the work. And of course, there's some preparation. We need to develop the strength, the right muscle groups, the core, the stance, everything. But that allows us to let go. One of my favorite books is Zen and the Art of Archery by Eugen Herrigel. He was a German professor, and he wrote, and it's a lesson for any athlete or anyone, Zen and the Art of Archery. And he talked about, how Zen archers use no effort. There was no one there doing the shot. And when Herrigel, he was an archer, he practiced archery. And when he went to Germany or went to Japan on sabbatical, he went to a Zen master who agreed to teach him something about Zen archery or Kyudo. And so Herigel, with some pride, pulled a big bow back and shot, and he hit the bullseye. The targets in Zen archery are not that far away. And he hit the bullseye, and he looked at the teacher, waiting for his nod of approval, and the teacher was shaking his head. And he couldn't understand. Wait a minute, I grabbed the brass ring. I did the thing. I succeeded. I hit the bullseye. How can you be shaking your head? But the point was, he was full of himself. He was doing the shot. And after months and months and months and months of practice, one and again, with form, flow, relaxation, pulling the bow, letting the bow be pulled by itself, one day he hit a shot, and the arrow almost missed the target. It hit the corner of the target, but the master said, "Hai," which means yes. Because in that shot, Herigel realized afterward there was no one there shooting. It was completely relaxed, using only large muscles without any sense of strain, and there was no one doing the shot. The bow was pulled, the arrow was let loose, and the arrow went to the target. And then he realized what he had accomplished, or what he hadn't accomplished. So there's that approach to doing nothing and no one. And yet it comes after a long paradoxical time of preparation and practice without any sense of strain. To me, that's what non-resistance means. It's been called the first spiritual law of acceptance or surrender. My colleague and friend Byron Katie, that's what she teaches really. Accepting everything that is. Don't resist it, flow with it. Like a good martial artist, take the force and use it your way. And so that's what I've been practicing in life ever since, in any situation, not just martial arts situation.
Yeah, well, I love this. There's an aspect of the Vedic literature called Dhanurveda, like Dhanurasana is the asana of the bow. And Dhanurasana is the Veda of transformation. It's been sort of mistranslated to be the military Veda, warring techniques, how to fight and how to win and all these techniques. But underneath it, Veda is considered truth or pure knowledge. And it's always about inner transformation, about the battle that we fight on the inside. And I know a lot of your books, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, many of your books are really about, fighting the battle that takes place on the inside. In athletics, we find ourselves stumbling upon, that incredible golf shot, or sinking a putt, or the runner's high. My best race is my easiest race. But fundamentally, these are all, I always felt like that exercise was really just a model for handling stress in your life from a calm place. Using the analogy of a hurricane, the bigger the eye, the more powerful the winds. And when you're pulling back a bow from the Vedic Dhanurveda perspective, every little movement of pulling back that bow has obviously an exponential effect at the level of the target. So the idea was to pull back the bow, establish inner silence, inner peace, inner calm, your true self, and then shoot the arrow from that place. And I'd love for you to just kind of take the sports analogy and help us understand how to take, because I know this is I really feel like this is what your life's work was really about, is to help people get a glimpse of how to stop engaging in behavior based on patterns of behavior we created as young children to be safe and secure that we're still projecting on the screen today as adults. And how do we find our way to let the delicate petals of our flower open and let something more vulnerable, more delicate, and more powerful and more truthful out? So how can you help us understand what you've learned along the way to help us do that?
Well, I have another story in response. My wife and I recently returned. I was on a speaking tour of 10 different cities, 7 countries in 3 weeks, a European speaking tour. And while we were away, something happened in the news you may have not heard of, but I guess a couple million people did. That is, Ivanka Trump actually cited a quote by the Greek philosopher Socrates. And the quote was, direct all your energy not in fighting the old, but in developing the new. And that quote, as it turned out, was not from the ancient Greek Socrates. She misquoted. It was actually from my Socrates, from Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And so it was on the blogosphere, on Newsweek.com, Salon, all these magazines. They said, no, this was actually from a book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And even Stephen Colbert, actually, in his opening monologue, mentioned the quote in myself.
Oh, great.
It was a fun thing. While we were traveling in Europe, this all came. So I had 5 minutes of fame before it all disappeared. Tempest in a teapot. But the point was, you say we develop these patterns. You know, a habit is an abstract idea. It simply means we tend to do something over and over, whether it's a so-called good habit or a less good habit, less resourceful habit. And focusing on the new rather than fighting the old is one key. The way I would put it, and I think the way I put it in Body Mind Mastery, is that if we had to go to the supermarket and it was across a public square, but it had snowed that day and the ground was covered by a smooth coat of snow, and we left our house to walk across the diagonal of that square, we would make footprints all the way across to the store. But let's say just before we get to the store, we realize we forgot our wallet. So we turn around, we walk back, probably through the same footprints in the opposite direction. And then we get our wallet, we turn around, we go back along the same track. And pretty soon now we've got an established pattern, the same track, like our neurological tracks we develop by doing something more than once. We begin to develop these patterns. So it's comfortable staying within those patterns. It starts to seem natural to us. We get used to them. And it feels uncomfortable if we try another pattern. So understanding this, let's say I was a little boy learning to hit a baseball, and someone tossed the ball to me and I swung and missed because I'm a little boy, I'm just learning. And then I miss again, and I miss again, and I miss again. But let's say you were watching and you noticed I was swinging underneath the ball every time. I kept swinging too low. The natural tendency would be to say, hey, little Dan, swing higher. But the problem is I'm now used to swinging too low. So in trying to swing higher, I would undercompensate. I would want to stay close to where I've been doing it. It's now a pattern. So instead, if you told me, I want you to deliberately miss the ball 5 more times, but make sure you swing above the ball, too high. And in trying to swing too high, I'm probably going to hit the ball. But the key is, and this is where the law of balance comes in, if we're out of balance in any area of our life, by working both sides, we find the center, not by trying to eke our way, improving incrementally toward the center. Work both sides. If one shoots an arrow too low to the left, make sure the next shot goes too high to the right. Do the opposite. And if we do that in life, if someone speaks too quickly, people tell them, I can't understand you, you speak so quickly. We need to deliberately try to speak too slowly, over articulating. By doing that, we find center for us. So that's how we can overcome patterns that aren't helping us, by working the other side. It's the quickest way I know of to accelerate one's learning curve.
Wow. So if someone has a short temper, what would be the opposite of that? That they, react, in an aggressive way, or even a passive aggressive way. What would be the advice there?
Well, I spoke with an inmate at San Quentin when I lived in California. I live in Brooklyn, New York now. You might hear some sound effects, sirens. I don't charge extra for that. Anyway, when I was in California, I spoke at San Quentin Prison to a group of inmates who were in the Inside Prison Project, where they do yoga and meditation. It's an opt-in type of program. And one of the inmates had a real temper problem. And he came up to me after on a break and said, I have a real problem with rage. And I said, no, you don't. And he turned to me and said, yes, I do. And I said, no, you don't. And he said, yes, I do. And he was getting angry. And I said, no, rage is not a problem. Emotions pass through us like the weather. Rage is like a storm. Storms are a natural part of the weather patterns. I said, the problem is not that you feel angry or enraged. The problem is what you do when you're enraged. And a light bulb went on for him. He didn't have to change his emotions or not feel this or not feel that, because emotions are not in our conscious control. We can't will ourselves to feel differently than how we feel at any given moment. Fortunately, though, the feelings change all the time, moment to moment through our day. So he learned to focus on his behavior rather than trying to fix his emotions. Anger management courses are not about managing anger, they're about managing behavior, what we do when we're angry. So someone then can be very angry, and it'll pass, everything does, but they can be very angry and learn to behave differently, learn to take a deep breath, learn to shake loose of the body and relax, because that's under our control. And then they can be angry and relaxed. And that's a very different kind of anger than all the tension that tends to go with it. And that's also a way to deal with stress. Stress is an abstract idea. But if we can focus on relaxing the body, taking a deep breath, then stress becomes something much more manageable and less debilitating. Stressful situations are a part of life because we care about life. We're engaged with it. So when we notice a stressful situation, that's when to pay special attention to relaxing and taking some deep breaths. And even a martial artist who's being attacked by multiple attackers, that's exactly when they have the most difficulty relaxing. That's when they need most to relax and move more in a flowing manner.
So it sounds like, you also talk about something you call natural order, how nature is never in a rush. You never see the Canadian geese huffing and puffing after a day of flying, or a deer exhausted, right? So is that what you're talking about, is sort of just, stress is and anger, these are part of the natural order? Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, it's more of a Taoist idea than the natural order, trusting the way or the Tao. I was working as an administrator in a bodywork school some years ago. After I'd written Way of the Peaceful Warrior, it went out of print. There's a long, funny story about that, but I won't take the time right now. But until it came back into print again and then started getting out there by word of mouth, during that time I was working in an office and doing a typical office thing. And it was a Friday afternoon, and there were things I really wanted to get done, had to get done before I left that day, calling people, filling out forms. And I felt my blood pressure rising. I felt like this headache beginning. And in that moment, I happened to look out of the window just in a moment, and I saw a cloud floating across the sky. And it wasn't racing the wind to get ahead. It wasn't dawdling. It was simply going with the pace of the wind. And it conveyed a message to me at that time. And I found myself taking a deep breath, relaxing all that tension I built up without realizing it in the moment. And I ended up getting all my calls done, filling out the forms with nice handwriting, printing, and completing my tasks in a way that was completely relaxed and accepting the natural order of things. And see, nature has always been my primary teacher. And that's something I learned from that cloud. And we've all heard the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Okay, it's a common saying in the seeker's jargon. But many people misunderstand that to mean that if they're somehow deserving or have done all this preparation and initiation, a teacher like Socrates will enter their life and guide them up the path. But what I believe it means is when the student is ready or paying attention, the teacher appears everywhere, even in the shape of a cloud or a tree bending in the wind, or this changing cycle of the seasons in their own time, or even an old gas station mechanic. You can learn lessons from anyone and anything if you're paying attention.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. There's a concept in the Vedas and Ayurveda too, called the coexistence of opposites, right? Where the two forces have to coexist: dynamic activity and silence, parasympathetic, sympathetic, the winds of a storm in the eye of the storm, the nucleus sitting still with electrons spinning around it, the sun sitting still with planets spinning around it. This idea that if we could mimic that macrocosm inside of us, that we would experience that ability to be, calm and therefore in tune with the natural order, and therefore the bigger the eye, the more powerful the winds, the more productive we can be, and really find that boundless, human potential. Did you experience, when you studied nature, which is really what Ayurveda is is about. It's a study of nature itself. Did you experience that concept of the coexistence of opposites, and does that apply to some of your teachings in your writings or even in your personal life?
I'd say both. It's hard to ignore, and yet it's as if nature and all her lessons are waiting patiently, with infinite patience, for us to get the message. And so human speakers like you, like myself, and other authors, we do our best to articulate some of this wisdom. Einstein, there's a story about Albert Einstein. He was walking in a woods with a friend when he looked down and saw a little turtle walking along the ground. And delighted, Einstein picked it up to put it in his pocket and take it home to give to his niece. And then he hesitated. He stopped. He took it out of his pocket. He put it back down where he found it. And he said, for one man, I think I've tampered enough with nature. So I think he did appreciate, he appreciated these laws of nature, or laws of spirit. They're also called universal laws, as you know. And I think mystics and scientists are both seeking to understand these same laws. They just use different methods of inquiry. And I wrote a book called The Laws of Spirit. I think that it's reached out to many people, where I learned these lessons from a woman sage, an ageless woman sage, while we're walking through the mountains, through the natural environment. She teaches me 12 fundamental universal laws that apply to everyday life. The law of balance, the law of process, the law of presence, of unity, of cycles. So all these laws are there, and they're waiting for us. You don't need to read my book, just pay attention to nature. But my book is a good translation of some of the wisdom of nature.
I think it'd be a really good idea for everybody to read your books, because I actually think that, while we all know that going in the forest and being in nature is critical for our health and well-being, and there's good science behind that, sometimes it's difficult to still our mind and become aware of what actually is around us and what nature is trying to tell us and what our nature is trying to tell us as well. So I would highly recommend to check out Dan's books at danmillman.com. He's got 17 of them, 18 on the way. And Dan, I'm curious, in conclusion, I think you've had 40 years of experience. You're a professional athlete, a competitive athlete, world-class athlete. What are you doing these days, to keep you, excited, inspired, and also physically and athletically? Are you still jumping, or what's your daily routine look like?
Well, here in Brooklyn, it's harder to find a trampoline, but I have found a few places, and I do jump now and then. I still enjoy doing somersaults. I'm 72. I'm pushing 73. But I can go to the Y. I do a workout. It's been my basis for 30 years. Literally every day, I call the Peaceful Warrior Workout. And that's one of the online courses at my website. Nice. And by the way, the website is also peacefulwarrior.com. If someone doesn't remember my name and the spelling, they can always look up peacefulwarrior.com. It goes to the same place. And there are some online courses there. It's a 4-minute workout, and it gets every part of the body. And I've been practicing it and teaching it for, now a little over 30 years. There's also a 4-minute meditation. It's actually about the process of what we let go in the process of dying. And I know of no better way to help us appreciate life. So there's that 4-minute meditation. But I continue to stay active. I go to the Y also, and meet some old cronies there, and do some light weights and swim a bit in a sauna. I believe as you get older, we actually need more exercise in terms of, we need to spend more time exercising generally than younger people, but just a different kind of exercise. Rather than mixed martial arts, somebody my age would gravitate toward Tai Chi, for example. Exercise, age-appropriate exercise that suits our body and our condition. One of the fundamental principles that I teach in this approach to living, I call the Peaceful Warrior's Way. Living with a peaceful heart, but recognizing there are times we need a warrior's spirit. And one of the fundamental principles is there is no best book or teacher or philosophy or religion or diet or martial art or exercise system. There is only the best for each of us at a given time of our life. Like it's an experiment. We have to find out what works best for us. So I continue to do that, John, day by day. What best serves? How much or how little should I do? What is balanced for me? And that's all I could ask about anyone else.
Wow. Well, incredible words of wisdom. I totally agree. As we get older, we need to spend more time just keeping our bodies healthy. It just takes more time. And the idea that we are both peaceful and have to be that warrior, to fight and to fight the illusion of the mind that keeps us locked into patterns of behavior that don't always serve us. That's the spiritual warrior that I love about your work. It just keeps making us look deeper and drive deeper to find ways to release a deeper, more beautiful, more loving, peaceful version and more powerful version of ourselves out. Not that powerful is good. It just happens to be who each of us are. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know that you're really busy. I love your work. I can't encourage enough for everyone to pick up a copy of The Peaceful Warrior. His one of his more recent books, The Hidden School, is the conclusion of The Peaceful Warrior. So read the whole Peaceful Warrior series. You'll love it. It's a great guide for life and definitely a guide for how to find real joy in your physical performance and your workout. So it's not just grinding and beating your body up. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Remember, peacefulwarrior.com, and you be well and take care.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, John. Thank you.
Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.